Noxcrew! Hey guys, it's Avondale back again for another super hole in the wall behind the scenes video. So in episode 1 we talked about how the game selects the walls, how it picks which direction they come from, and also how it scores you. Today's episode I want to talk a lot about booby traps.
Booby Trap!
Super hole in the wall had a lot of redstone challenges that I had to overcome in order to finish the map. Now, some of them were pretty easy and others were just time consuming and I had trouble thinking my way through them. But when I finally figured out the majority of them, I realized that I could finish the map within maybe another hour of work. So I made this huge push, hey, I need to finish this map tonight. And I finally finished it and still had more time to mess around. And I had this random thought, you know, wouldn't it be neat if there was an option where you could turn something on that every however many walls, maybe 10, something would happen that would make it more difficult for you to stay on the walls. Wouldn't that make the game more exciting? And it was just a passing thought, but I figured I'd try it, and the first thing I thought of was, wouldn't it be funny if a bunch of snowmen showed up on the platform and you had to sort of maneuver your way around them so you could see the walls that were coming? And that was the birth of the booby traps. I worked some more on it that night, and I realized that if I was going to have a randomizer to send random booby traps at you, I might as well fill a dispenser. So I came up with 9 ideas for booby traps, and some of them are still in the game, some of them aren't, but the next day I had people on to test the game. I didn't tell them anything, just that the game worked. And so they start playing it, and all of a sudden it says rolling the dice, and they go, what's that? And then a big message pops up on the screen, and a bunch of snowmen spawn all over them, and everyone just started laughing. That was when I realized we could really nail something great with the booby traps, and we ended up expanding them to 9 good ones, and then even further to include the 18 that are currently in the game. So, for today's episode, I'm going to go through each booby trap individually and explain what it does and also explain how it works. A lot of people don't know what every booby trap is supposed to do, so I hope this video will clear up some confusion about that, as well as give you some information on how they work in the first place. So the original version of the game didn't allow you to turn booby traps on and off, or pick how frequently they came. And this was because we built a lobby with 4 walls, and we just didn't have an extra wall to put the control panel on. So we came up with this lever here.
Booby Trap!
So the way that this works is it displays some text to you, you click the number you want, and then it changes the frequency of the walls. So let's go see how that works. We just come out here. So when the lever is up, it's going to trigger this top row, and when it's down, it's going to trigger the bottom row. So the first thing that happens is it enables the BT frequency trigger. So this essentially allows people who are playing your map to control commands by clicking things in chat. It's also going to set an iron block down below that I'll explain when we get down there. And then these blocks right here display the text to you. So if we take a look at one of these commands, I'll pop it up on the screen right here so you can see it. It's a tell raw command, and it has the text that says 15, which is the frequency of the booby trap, and then there's a click event. And the action is that it's running a command. That all should make sense. And the value of the command is trigger the BT frequency set 15. So what that's doing is it's allowing the player to set their BT frequency score to 15 just by clicking the thing in chat. And then it just tells the color. So how does the game know when that's clicked? We'll figure that out down below, but the other thing you should look at is when the lever's down, it's going to set that iron block that we set up top back to air, and it's also going to tell you the text that says the booby traps are off. So let's go down and see how it figures it out. So we're down in the redstone now, and we're looking at a clock that only runs when you're in the lobby before the game starts. So these command blocks here that are triggered by it are testing for a player with the score that was set by the specific objectives that you get when you flick the booby trap lever. So this is the one that corresponds to the command that we looked at on the screen. It's a BT frequency of 15 and a min of 15, so it's looking for a person specifically with 15 in the BT frequency score. So when you get a positive output from that, it's going to trigger either of these command blocks on the end, which just sets everybody's BT frequency back to 0, and it's also going to clone a block. Now this works really similar to a lot of the other things that I've been doing, and it's just going to clone this block here, which tests for a person with a score P Booby that's at least 15. It's going to clone it to right here. And the last thing that it does is it's going to tell everybody that that's the Booby Traps frequency that got set. So now if we look at this machine over here, it's testing while the game is being played for someone with a P Booby score of at least whatever it's been set to. So currently it's set to 5, and so every time it finds someone with that, it's going to try to push the signal through to this iron block. Now this is the iron block that I mentioned up above. It'll be set to air if the booby traps are off, so it can't do anything with that positive signal. But when the booby traps are on, this iron block pulls the signal through this repeater, and then it's going to do two things. It's going to reset everybody's P Booby score back to 0, and it's also going to set a redstone block up one platform above, and that's what actually decides what booby trap you're going to get. So this P Booby objective, I should talk about that real quick. You get a P Booby score every single time you actually pass a wall. Now bonus points doesn't count towards this, but we'll talk more about bonus points later. It's every time you pass a wall, your P Booby score increases by 1. So that means that when everybody's P Booby score gets reset to 0, the next booby trap will trigger when the first person passes 5 walls, or 10, 15, 20, whatever you have it set to. Alrighty, so we're up above on the booby trap selection floor. When the game finds a player who's passed the certain number of walls they need to trigger a booby trap, it's going to place a redstone block right here where this pink wool is. Now, let's take a look at what happens when it places a redstone block there. First thing that happens is it says rolling the dice in chat, and then there's a delay, and now it's going to pick the booby trap that's going to happen. Now, it does this with a series of clones. This wasn't a nice straight line originally, but when we doubled the number of booby traps, I had to sort of work it to the outside to cause myself less work on the other end. So the first thing that happens is it clones this dispenser here over. Now, all this dispenser does is it picks which one of these two dispensers is going to get cloned next. And now these two dispensers are the first 9 and last 9 booby traps, and the way that they work is they just have command blocks in here that place redstone blocks randomly on one of the first 9 or the last 9 diamond blocks here. So when the signal goes through here, it clones the first dispenser over here. That picks one of these two dispensers to put over here, and then these stacks of command blocks here just clear out that gold block area so it's ready for the next one to go through. So now let's place a block here and we'll see what actually happens.
Chicken tornado!
So you see that time it picked chicken tornado. So once it reaches the end of this and it picks a direction, it chooses one of these booby traps here. The booby trap will trigger, it'll put up the title as well as play the sound, and then after 2 seconds is when the booby trap actually starts. So now this line of command blocks here all the way down is just what it takes to start the booby trap, and then over here this is the timer. If it needs to be timed, which most of them do, it'll set a block here, it'll run this timer for 10 seconds, and then when it gets to the end it shuts everything off with this series of command blocks. This diamond block here will have a redstone block placed on it when the game ends to stop any booby traps that were in progress. So that's the timer. Now we'll go through and look at each of these booby traps individually and see how they work. We'll start with Aerostorm. Now, what happens when it chooses Aerostorm, it says the name, and then it comes over here, and this command block right here is going to place a redstone block where the Aerostorm actually happens. So if we just find that real quick, I believe it's this top one here. Yes, it is. So when it hits the end of that signal, it's going to place a redstone block here, and all that's going to do is just send a signal around, which is going to trigger arrows to spawn from every direction with a velocity towards the center of the platform, and that's what shoots the arrows around trying to knock you off. Chicken Tornado works in the same exact way as Aerostorm. The first thing we wanted to do for this idea was called Snowball Frenzy, but it actually didn't work because the snowballs didn't really seem to do anything to you. So Chicken Tornado just places a redstone block down for this contraption here, and it sends a signal around that summons chickens with motion on them. It's the same commands as the arrows, just with chickens replaced. And that one doesn't really have a purpose other than to just sort of distract you, and it's kind of funny. At the end of this timer, there's a command block that will kill all the chickens on the map, and so there's a block in here that also starts the timer. Getting Dizzy is the first booby trap I did that uses the Minecraft potion effects to hinder the player. Now, these needed to coexist with the potion effects that we needed, such as saturation and jump boost, and to do that we had to do some fancy maneuvering, but I'll show you what this does first. When the redstone signal comes down here, it's going to clone the block that's 2 above it up to a spot in a clock up above, and then this just starts the timer. So this is the actual command. It's going to affect the people with this onboard score at least 1. That means that they're on the platform, so when you jump off the platform you lose the dizziness effect. And then there's your effect right there. The true is what hides the potion particles. So let's go see in the clock where these command blocks get put. So we're looking at the main game control clock right now, and this is just a redstone clock that runs 20 times a second. You can see here every time I smack one of these blocks it pops right back in place. And so the effects happen right here, and the commands get run from this side here to this side here at the end. So the first thing that happens is your effect gets cleared 20 times a second. After that, you'll get saturation and jump boost again, and then if there's a booby trap that's active at that time, there'll be a command block here with that effect. So the way that this works is, since the jump boost happens at the end of this thing 20 times a second, that's what the game remembers, is the stuff that happens after. So it's all in order, but if anything happens after the clear effect, that's the stuff that the game sticks in. So looking at the booby trap here, when one of the effects needs to come up, it'll clone that command block into this space, and then after 10 seconds, the clock will set this space back to air. Super speed works the same way as getting dizzy, as well as a few other ones. My eyes is the blindness effect. That works the same way. And if we continue down here, molasses works the same way as that. So Too Loud is the gas sound. A lot of people don't like this one, and that's the main reason that it stayed in the game, is because it's just supposed to annoy you. And so the way that this works is it's going to start the timer and take this redstone block right here and just turn it into air. And what that's going to do is it's going to trigger these sounds, but only to people who are on board, and that's why I can't hear them right now, so that's kind of nice. And then when the timer runs out, it places a redstone block back here and the clock stops. So Lonely simply spawns zombies onto the platform that will then try to smack you, which usually knocks you off into the water. After the timer is done, it kills all the zombies on the map. Jack Frost works identically to So Lonely, except it's snowmen instead of zombies, and then they get killed at the end as well. Now, bonus points is one of the more complicated ones to do. So there's 2 main things that make this work when the timer, when the signal rather, reaches the end of this chain. So the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to set a block here, which is then going to send a signal through. And now these are all identical, and what they do is they add anyone who's on the platform 1 wall score. They also play the sound that you hear, but only when you're on the platform. And then it also sets a redstone block down below. So let's go down and take a look at what that does. Okay, so we're down in the team scoring area now that I showed off in the last video, and if you remember, I said that the bottom one just did the team scoring, and then the top one did the ones for the booby traps. And so now, every time the bonus points triggers, it just sets a block of redstone right here, and that's just going to check, it's going to count how many players are on there, and then add 1 for each player that it finds. Now, erosion is one of my favorite booby traps to do. It was really easy to set up, and it's pretty simple really when you think about it. So that's the one that starts the timer there, and then below it's just going to fill that platform with air, but it's going to only replace bedrock, so all the obsidian stays. So whenever you're playing this game type, if you hear erosion, just make sure you're standing on obsidian and you won't fall off. Now, all booby traps didn't have to be bad, and that was sort of where bumper bars came from. Bumper bars isn't always the most useful, but if you encounter one of the really hard difficulty walls, sometimes it's a lifesaver. And all that one's going to do is just clone in a certain area, and that area actually coexists with what we saw earlier where the arrows and the chicken tornado comes from. So this is the platform here that it clones in for the bumper bars. You'll see all the obsidian out here, and then after that's done, it's going to clone in this area down here, which deletes those blocks on the outside. One thing to note about bumper bars is if you're standing here and the wall passes the end of the platform, it won't actually count you as having passed the wall. You need to make sure you get back onto the platform afterwards. So sticky shoes just puts cobwebs in an area, and the way that I did this one was to just fill this area with webs and replace air. And so this area is simply the area that you see of cobwebs on the platform. Now I want to make sure that it put them everywhere, and that if there was a wall in place at the time, it wouldn't wipe them out. So I just had it do the same thing 3 times, and there are rare instances in the game where you can notice that happening. In the Jungle was an idea suggested to me by my brother, actually, and we tried it out and liked it so much that we had to keep it. It works really similarly to the way that Sticky Shoes does, where it just sort of fills specific areas with leaves and replaces the air in them. And there's actually some more command blocks hidden down here to make sure that it fills the entire area that it needs to. This is a lot better of a booby trap if you have graphics put on fast, because then you can't see through the walls. And then at the end of the timer, it'll set those leaves all back to air so you can see again. Now the Testificates one works exactly the same as Jack Frost and So Lonely, so we'll skip that one and we'll move over to Archery Practice. Now Archery Practice is different from Aerostorm because you're actually relatively safe in the middle of the platform. So it's going to summon the skeletons in with these command blocks, but I want to show you one thing that I had to do to make sure the skeletons would stay there and not hop down into the water. Okay, so right now we are actually entering in the chamber that is the master chamber for the 3 game modes that use water as the floor. So this actually gets cloned into the game at the beginning of each level. And what I had to do to make sure that the skeletons wouldn't leave is barrier blocks. So there's barrier blocks that trap the skeletons in here, and you can see them there. And that's what makes sure that they can't fall down into the water or lava or whatever's down there at that time, so that they stay up there and act as turrets. And it's like I said up above, when you're standing on the ends, they can really target you really well. If you stick to the middle, you actually have a fighting chance. Bomb Squad was actually almost entirely done by Skyao, who did the graphics for Super Hole in the Wall. And this is probably my second favorite booby trap. Everybody freaks out as soon as they see the creeper spawn, but they don't realize that it has such a long fuse on it. It's a 10-second fuse, just like the timer for the game, and the creeper will emit particle effects when it reaches a certain age of being alive, and that's why it starts to smoke right before it blows up. We put it in the minecart and made it invincible so you couldn't just smack it off. We wanted you to have to push it off instead. So this is what summons the creeper right here. It has an explosion radius of 3. The fuse of 200 makes it stay alive for 10 seconds. It's ignited, so that means the fuse starts immediately when it spawns, and then it's riding a minecart. Now the last booby trap is Hot Coals, and this one is unique because it's actually the only booby trap that doesn't go away after 10 seconds, even though it's a physical effect. So it's going to fill these areas with fire down below, and the fire will actually stay until the walls come through and sort of squeegee it out. So sometimes it could last 2 or 3 seconds, but other times it could last up to a minute, or theoretically forever if you didn't ever get a wall that would squeegee it out. So now that you know how all the booby traps work, I want to take a second to show you how the music system works in the game. Now this music system is special because it knows two things. It knows whether you're in the game or not, and it also knows whether there's currently a song playing or not. And it does that with this redstone block here, and then above this gold block could be an iron block in certain situations. So let's sort of explain this machine. The first thing that happens when the game starts is this redstone block is already here because there's no song playing. When the game starts, right when you hear the music start, that's because there was a block that's placed on top of this gold block that pulls the signal through. Now that's going to do two things. It's going to clone a dispenser in, as you might have guessed, and it's also going to do this over here, which is simply going to set this block over here to air. So the dispenser that it clones in is this dispenser right here, which has 7 command blocks in it. Now these 7 command blocks are the 7 out of the 8 tracks that weren't the last track to be played. So if I can explain that a little better, there's a series of dispensers that comes down here. When this song gets played in this row here, which if we look in this one you can see is Spaceball, it'll clone this dispenser over to here so Spaceball won't play a second time in a row. So when it clones this one over here, it's going to activate it, and that's going to pick from one of the other 7 songs which one should be next. This block just deletes the stuff that's in here, and then the cloning thing that happens when it comes over is that these lines get cloned into here. Now there's 3 command blocks here. The first one plays the song. This one is going to clone that dispenser that I mentioned into place back behind us. And then this is just the text that tells what song it's playing. Now, you'll notice over here, all these ones that are in storage have hoppers that are pointing into a chest. And now the chest is empty, but the hoppers have a certain number of items in them. Those number of items are equal to the length of the song. And you notice that the hoppers are sitting on top of redstone blocks, which means that they won't spit out any contents. When they get cloned over here into the system, there's no more redstone block underneath it, so they start bleeding out into the chest. Now, there's a comparator pulling a signal out of that, and so when there's items in this hopper, this will be on, this torch will be off, and so nothing will be happening here. As soon as this hopper is completely empty, this block gets triggered, which places this redstone block back over here. If you're still in the game, there'll be a block here that'll trigger through and cue the next song. If you're not in the game, it'll stop and wait for you to come back in the game. So real quick, we'll just put a block here and we'll watch what happens. Now, the songs aren't actually going to start because I have a resource pack with the songs taken out of it, but you'll notice that this got cloned in here, and we have all these items here that are ticking out. So if I take some items out to speed this up, you'll see here, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, torch comes on, redstone block gets placed, new song starts. And that's how it picks the music. So that's going to do it. We only did 2 episodes, but I think you get the main gist of how Super Hole in the Wall runs. I explained the wall selection, direction choice, and scoring, and then today I explained the booby traps and the music system. There are some other systems that make the game work, but they're a little more technical and not really necessary to get the main point of the game. If you guys have any questions, or if I didn't explain something clearly, please let me know in the comments. I'd really like to help you understand this map, because the more things you guys understand, the better chance you have to make something cool of your own. I'm also looking for ideas for new booby traps. There's always the potential for us to release an update with more booby traps, and I have some excellent ideas of 4 or 5, but I wouldn't want to release a new map until we had another 18 to really make the game more diverse. So let me know about those in the comments and any other questions you might have, and I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as I can. I've been Avondale. Thanks for watching.